Hey there, Grumpy Old Fart here. This is a compilation video of some of my greatest hits. Hope y'all enjoy them. MacGuffins of necessity. Every main thing has what's called a MacGuffin, I guess, and they're very prevalent. Every good story has a linchpin, one item, one decision, one event, something that allows the characters the opportunity to become successful. In a story or a drama, the linchpin is totally dependent on the author to write it well. A poorly written linchpin makes the entire thing fall apart. In an adventure story, sometimes that linchpin takes the form of an item necessary to defeat the villain or to win the day. Again, the writing has to be good or the entire thing falls apart. Kind of like that dagger from the Star Wars movie. In a role-playing game, such linchpins are very common, and they are commonly referred to as MacGuffins. I'm sure other genres call them MacGuffins as well, but since this is an AD&D video, we're going to go with this. Now, MacGuffins of necessity. There are a plethora of different things you, as a dungeon master, can use in your game as a MacGuffin. It could be a normal physical object, a magic item, a song, a phrase, a magic spell, virtually anything. As a dungeon master, you don't really need to do a lot of writing around said MacGuffin. The MacGuffin performs a function. You need to create the MacGuffin and the purpose and a little justification. That's pretty much it. You don't have to tell the story. Just get it started and let the players tell the story. That part's easy. But as a veteran of many games and campaigns, believe me when I say that when it comes to MacGuffins, details matter. The MacGuffin has to be one of a kind. The item, song, phrase, whatever, cannot serve any other main function in your campaign. If the players learn they have a skeleton key that opens all kinds of doors, you will never be rid of it, and they will use it every chance they get. Once used, the MacGuffin must become useless. The MacGuffin, if it's an item, must be something they will not want to part with, even under the most desperate situation. I told the story in another video of the ornate silver dagger my players acquired in their travels. The dagger was worth a lot, but I didn't realize how broke some of my players were. They sold the dagger when times got hard, and they used the money from that sale to outfit themselves for the game. They used the money for the good of the group, and that was cool, but I didn't realize that it was that dagger that they had sold. You know, that specific one, because there were a number of silver daggers floating around. Later on, when the group was sneaking through the underground tunnels into the bad guy's lair, they ran into a door that was impregnable. They needed that key to open the door, and the dagger was the key. Yeah, by the way, it's also important and imperative that between game sessions, you check out the character sheets to ensure that they still have the MacGuffin. I made that mistake, and that was years of a campaign shot to hell because I didn't keep track of the MacGuffin. That was on me. If they sell it or lose it somehow, you must find a way for them to get it back. This could be a great side mission that kind of links back to the main campaign, but it might be better to not let them lose it in the first place. There are a number of ways to ensure the player characters don't get rid of said item. The best way I can think of is to make the item important to them. Make it a minor magic item that is very useful to the group. The One Ring also served as a ring of invisibility, for example. I had a number of other MacGuffins over the years, but having learned my lesson with the dagger, I made sure they wanted to keep the item. There was an amulet that acted as a +2 item of protection, regardless of what magic armor or whatever other protections they had. They wanted to keep that thing. An amulet. I had another amulet that allowed a wizard to wear and use up to 10 magic rings at the same time, as long as they all had different functions. So he had a ring of protection, he had a ring of spell storing, he had a ring of wizardry, he had, all kinds of different stuff, There was another amulet that granted 25% magic resistance to the wearer. Man, nobody wanted to part with that. They almost didn't want to do the mission for that. They would rather have the amulet, An item that automatically had detect magic or comprehend languages or ESP or some other innocuous little effect that is so useful that a player won't want to part with it. That's probably the best thing. You can't make it too powerful, or the player might find they'd rather keep the MacGuffin, then use it to defeat the bad guy. If that happens, your entire campaign could be derailed. Regardless of what your MacGuffin is or what it does, I have to reiterate that the player characters must want to keep it. If push comes to shove, you may have to let slip that the MacGuffin is important to the resolution of the campaign, but that's only as a very last resort. I find it's very satisfying to let them get used to having the MacGuffin and then watch their faces as they realize they have to part with it to defeat the bad guy. So sometimes it's fun to be a little mean, But remember, MacGuffins can be a very important part of your game. How you design and handle them is very, very important. Sometimes it's something they have to quest for, but sometimes it's something that just happens to fall into their laps. If it's the latter, the secrecy of them not knowing its importance can be a nice surprise for them later. Just don't let them part with it, because it can be disastrous. That dagger thing really, really threw the whole game for a loop. And rather than continue, they said screw it, and they went on and found something else to do. And I can't blame them, because they had no idea where to even start looking for that dagger. I honestly don't recall where they sold it. So, at any rate, just be aware of your MacGuffin status. That's all I'm saying. You folks have a good one. I hope this helps. I'm not trying to tell you how to run your game. I'm trying to help people to run better games. I've been doing this a long time. I've made lots of mistakes. Learn from my mistakes. On creativity. One of the most enjoyable things about running a game, being a dungeon master, is the creative aspect. You have to come up with scenarios and campaigns. A scenario is your characters go on one mission and that's that. Excuse me. A campaign is where your characters run a series of adventures all joined together into one long campaign. All over the world, and the world is run by the dungeon master, the game master. It's called different things in different games, but the point is, in D&D, it's called a dungeon master. The various makers, publishers, creators of these games have put out a wealth of resource books. Like, for example, in Dungeons & Dragons, they have the monster manuals, different modules, generic non-player character books, all kinds of different stuff. Take advantage, okay? And a lot of these you can find on online, PDF version, or hell, if anything else, just look at some of the stories and they'll give you ideas. But my point is, these are all great. Plus, we have old magazines. I don't think they're in print anymore, but they used to have these magazines called Dragon Magazine and Dungeon Magazine. Dragon Magazine dealt with extra resources for the players, for the games, and Dungeon Magazine, as I recall, actually had dungeons in there, pre-made. So you could use those in your campaign. Very, very good stuff. I highly recommend. Dragon Magazine has a couple of articles, a plethora of paladins. I love that one because it always struck me that paladins had to be lawful good, but not all gods, because they worship a god, right? But not all gods are lawful good. There's evil gods. Do the evil gods have paladins as well? You see what I'm saying? And they have different things. The other thing they have on there is an article called "It's a Material World." I did a video on spell components. Go check that one out. Dragon Magazine put out an article, and I think you can still find it online, but it's called "It's a Material World," and what it does is every spell in the game has spell components of some kind, verbal, somatic, or material. If it's material, you got to have the material components to cast the spell. A lot of game masters don't use material components, and that's fine. But if you want to, you can. And this article, "It's a Material World," tells how rare items are, spell components are, how much the relative cost of them, that kind of thing. And it's a very good resource. I highly recommend it. So check those out if you get the chance. The DM is perfectly justified in adding whatever they want from other sources or from his own imagination. into a game. So if you're running a story and you can't find a monster that fits this one particular situation, make one. You can do that. I've done it. I've done a lot of them. Or you can take an existing monster and modify it a little bit. You know, the trolls are notorious for regenerating, but they're vulnerable to fire. So a troll with a ring of fire resistance is a nasty critter. I did a video called "Fear the Rakshasa." The Rakshasa. It's Rakshasa is a Hindu creature, and it's just nasty. Excuse me. And those things you could add little magic items to that, or beef them up a little bit, and they'll take on just about anything. A Rakshasa is nasty by itself, and you could modify critters to be different than what they are in the book. And you're, as a dungeon master, you're perfectly within your rights to do so. Okay. The only thing you have to do is, if you're adding stuff from your own imagination, take into account play balance, and I did a video on that, and game mechanics, meaning you have to know what kills a creature, you have to know the weaknesses, you have to know what it can do in game terms. In other words, if this creature shoots fire, is it burning hands? Does it use fireballs? Is it a breath weapon? That kind of thing. Put it in game mechanics so that it's easier for you to deal with. Makes everything easier. Good example, years ago, about adding different imaginative things to the game. Years ago, I was playing in my friend Art's game. Art runs a really great game. He's one of the best dungeon masters I know. I haven't seen him in years. I wish I could still play with him. The group had went through a magical portal into a weird land. Pay attention. Trees with tangerines, paper-thin flowers and of green and yellow. A river of chocolate with a boat made of wafers, and there were two girls. One of them had hypnotic eyes and wore a lot of diamond jewelry and stuff, and she was flying in the air. And one of them had glowing eyes and could teleport when you approached her. There were centaurs with rockers on their feet, and they were eating pastries with cream all over them. A sweet cream. At one point, we were like, what the hell? And one of the gamers, and I can't remember which one it was, it's been years ago. I think it was while I was in the Air Force. That was 86, 87, something like that. He recognized the contents of this weird land. Apparently he was a Beatles fan. Lucy in the sky with diamonds, rocking horse people, eating marshmallow pie. He took the lyrics of that song and created a little side adventure for us. You can do that. It's okay. The hypnotic eyes, the one girl with glowing eyes, she could shoot fire beams out of them. It was pretty cool. But inspiration can literally come from anywhere. And as a dungeon master, you can put anything into your world you want, as long as there's play balance and it fits the campaign. So, don't feel overwhelmed. First off, welcome aboard. The game needs more dungeon masters, more game masters, more storytellers, whatever game you're playing. Not every player can function as a game master, but we need them. They are important to the game. So if you're aspiring to be one, welcome aboard. You're showing exceptional grit and initiative, and I applaud you. That being said, there are tons of great dungeon masters on Facebook in the different groups who are really great sources of information. Most are more than willing to help. Nobody is throwing you to the wolves. You are not alone. Okay? If you have questions, ask. Somebody will give you some good information. There's lots of good people on Facebook. If somebody asks me a question, I'm more than willing to help. And most other dungeon masters are as well, because they understand the value of a quality dungeon master for a game. The game needs good dungeon masters. It needs good players. Now, this video is going to be ostensibly about YouTube. Why? because there are tons of great informational channels on YouTube specifically to help younger dungeon masters, game masters, storytellers, whatever. They're all over YouTube. They really are. I like to think that I give a good advice in these videos and like that. And you know, all over my channel. But regardless, here are some of my favorites, the ones that I go to for advice. First one is Taking 20. Really great channel. Next one, Crit Crab. Crit Crab tells stories about instances that happen during games, and he imparts wisdom through that method. Different methods of learning for everybody, right? If everybody was the same, the world would be a dull place. Liches and Losers, really great channel. Critical Role. Critical Role is another really, really great channel. This guy, I want to say it's Matt Mercer, and he's got a very famous game that he runs. He runs some celebrities in his. He's had, I want to say Vin Diesel and Terry Crews has been in there. I mean, great channel. The man gives some good advice too. So, you know, pay attention to what he does, what he says, how he runs his game. Okay. Dwarven Tavern. Those guys are just funny. Those people are awesome. They give great advice, and they're very charismatic about it. A lot more charismatic than I am. Classic DM. That's another good one. The DM Layer. That's another good one. Grog Talk. One word. Grog Talk. That's another one. One of my favorite ones is DM It All. They talk about every game. Okay, all different kinds of games, not just Dungeon Masters for D&D, but they also do Storytellers for Vampire. They do Gamma World. They do Boot Hill. They do, I mean, just every game you could imagine. The Palladium games with Heroes Unlimited and like that. What's that other one? Rifts. They do everything. Okay. High Rollers D&D. That's another one. Another really great one. My favorite one. He does a live, I want to say it's a podcast or it's a live event. It's called Great GM. Great GM Live is what it's called. His channel is called How to Be a Great GM. This guy's my favorite. He does good videos. He's got tons of them on his channel. Subscribe to his channel. It's called How to Be a Great GM. Subscribe to that channel, and you open up a world of videos to help you with anything you can imagine. He does videos on everything: how to build adventures, how to build characters, how to build suspense in your game, how to be a better dungeon master. Okay, and he does it for a variety of different games. So, you know, again, and then this is not all of them. There's tons of others. Some of the, you probably know some that you'll be able to find some rather that I don't know about. And amen. More power to you. Remember, the whole point of these games is to have fun. And as a dungeon master, it's your responsibility to make sure these players are having fun. How do you do that? You challenge them. You give them a good adventure. You be consistent in the rules. That's about all there is to it. Everything else falls into place. Racial minimums and maximums for player characters. I don't like that. There are elves who simply aren't very dexterous. There are dwarves who are not very tough. There's a whole range, a whole gamut of player character abilities. Not every player is going to fit into that little mold. Make your character what you want. And if you roll if you roll a low constitution for your dwarf, live with it. Just the way it is. According to the rules, player characters of many races cannot be clerics or druids. I never liked that. I never liked that at all. As far as druids go, nature should accept everyone. If you're a living being, a natural living being, you fit in nature somewhere. So anybody can be a druid. As far as clerics goes, anybody who worships a god can be a cleric. You see what I'm saying? Gods exist where
Worshippers exist to worship them. If you can worship a god, you should be able to be a cleric. Okay, as I understand it, according to the books, many races, all their clerics are all non-player characters. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. That closes those races off, or those classes off from certain races, and I don't like that. So any sentient PC can worship a god and therefore should be able to be a cleric. Here's one of my big ones. Level limits for certain classes for certain races. I never like that. If you could be a 30th level cleric, now there are some races who can't be certain classes. For example, a dwarf can't be a wizard. It says in the book, dwarves cannot be wizards. There's that stated right there. It doesn't say player character dwarves can't be wizards. It says there are no dwarven wizards. Dwarves cannot perform magic. But there is a difference between clerical and wizard magic. Dwarves can be clerics, they cannot be wizards. Okay? Now, what I'm talking about here is level limits. My big argument here is, why is an elf limited to level 11 magic user when a human is unlimited? Elves live a damn long time, and elves by definition are magical. How are they limited to level 11 and humans can be a level 30? You see? There's something wrong with that. I don't like that. I never ever use those. If you're a wizard, if you're an elf and you can make it to 30th level wizard, knock yourself out. Do your thing. Armor class adjustments by weapon type. I have found that it's just confusing to most people, and frankly, it's just not worth the effort. There is a speed factor that sometimes I use, and it depends, and I try to get it, depending on, like, for example, if I have a new group, I'll explain what it means, and if they want to use it, we can use it, but it's up to the group. And what speed factor is every weapon is assigned a speed factor, and because certain weapons are heavier and more cumbersome, they're not as fast as others. So whatever the speed factor is, you subtract from your initiative. So if you roll, using my system, if I roll a d10 and I get a +2 to my initiative, and say I roll a 7, and that means my initiative is a 9. But I'm using a big bad heavy two-handed sword. If I recall correctly, the speed factor on that is a 10. So I roll my total initiative of 9, and then I subtract 10, I'm actually going on -1s. Sometimes it's advantageous to go last in a round, but more often than not, you want to get your hit in first, because if that guy dies, he can't kill you. You see what I'm saying? So a lot of times, most players don't even use it, and I don't blame them. But there's still, there are reasons why you could use it. I can understand it. I am in favor of the concept of the speed factor, but in reality it makes the initiative process far too complicated, and it bogs down play and dulls the enjoyment for the players. So I try not to use it. If the players want to use it, I will, but I don't force it on them. Another rule, this happened years ago, somebody came up with that term THAC0, and if you don't know what that means, THAC 0, 2-hit armor class 0. It's the number you have to roll with your character, whatever character you're using, in order to hit armor class 0. Okay? A lot of people are dead set on it. I had a player ask me one time, he kept bugging me, what about THAC0? What about THAC0? I said, fuck THAC0. I don't even use it. I've never used it. Why? I have a chart. It's right here. I can tell you what it is. If a player is bound determined to use THAC0, knock yourself out. I don't care. But when you roll your THAC0 and you don't hit the monster, well, wait a minute. You mean he's got a better armor class than 0? Yeah. And I found that there are some rules that just get in the way. So I tend to ignore them. I did another video about this. Go check it out. This is more rules that I ignore. First edition AD&D is, in my opinion, by far the best edition of Dungeons & Dragons because of the flavor, the simplicity of play or combat, the ease of modification, and basically it's less rules to remember. I did a video basically on rules as a DM that I ignore, and I figured I'd do another one. Armor class adjustments by weapon type. I have been playing a long time, and I've been running this game a long time, and I have never used this because, frankly, I don't understand it. I don't know of anybody who does. I've never played with any AD&D game in anybody's game or with another dungeon master. I have never seen anybody who understands that table. Evidently, nobody does. If you do, please put it in the comments. I would be glad to read it. I have no idea how to use that table. I've been playing this a long time, and I have no idea. So, if you do, please put it in the comments. In my opinion, the entire concept of an alignment language is nonsense. Two people who agree on every political belief, every moral standard, they share every possible opinion, but they're born and raised in different places, opposite ends of the world. There may even be different races. How can they suddenly share a common language? How can they communicate simply because they share the same opinions? And now, once they learn to communicate, then by all means they'll get along fine. I'm not saying they're going to be at each other's throats, but just because they agree on politics or on this opinion or that opinion, they could be virtually identical in every opinion. But if they can't communicate, they can't communicate that. You see what I'm saying? If somebody does something and the other guy goes, then maybe. But communication, that's in my opinion, that's not a language that you can, There's no reason for alignment language. I don't even use it. I've never used it. I have found that the encounter reaction tables can be a bit lopsided. And if it maybe lopsided is not the right word. Maybe it is. I don't know. Let me explain. I was running a group of first level player characters in a wilderness travel adventure, and they needed food, and the ranger and the barbarian in the group decided they were going to go and hunt, and that's fine. No problem. A deer is a 2-hit die critter, and a bow does 1d6 damage. The ranger scored a hit, and I rolled on the reaction table because he obviously did not kill said deer. So I rolled on that reaction table. The deer got pissed. They attacked the ranger and the barbarian. There were 8 deer. 2 quick crits later, the ranger's dead. The barbarian turns and runs away. He runs back to camp, followed by this herd of 8 deer. According to the reaction rolls, the deer were pissed. They followed. The deer then proceeded to kill the entire party. I have not used those tables since. That was 81, maybe 82, something 1981, 1982, something like that. It was early on, and I have not used them since. Now, I'm not saying this is, again, these tables, they're meant as generalities, and you can use them if you want, but temper them with a little common sense, because, And I'm not saying this is how you have to play the game, again, but again, use a little common sense. Many times common sense trumps all the tables in the books, and rightly so, because sometimes those tables sometimes they're shit. Over the course of my gaming career, like I said, over 40 years, I have learned that there are some rules that do not need to be employed. Here's one rule that has stymied players for decades. As long as I've been playing, players have asked questions about this, and nobody's ever happy with it. So here's my solution to the problem. According to the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide, page 40, it requires between 4 and 12 hours of sleep, depending on the spell level capability of the caster, for a spellcaster to revitalize his mind enough to memorize, pray for, or meditate for spells for the day. So the way it works is you have I'll use wizard. For a cleric, it's a little different. But the time aspect is the same. For a wizard, you have a spell book, and in the morning you memorize your spells. For a cleric, you pray for whatever spells you want. For a druid, meditates. An illusionist has a spell book and memorizes his spells. You have to, it takes preparation to do this. And you have to have a rested mind, revitalized, able to absorb this knowledge and power in order to cast these spells. According to the book, depending on the spell level that you want to memorize, it takes between 4 and 12 hours of sleep to do this. Okay. The 9th level magic user spell, for example, requires 12 hours of sleep, according to the book. Furthermore, memorizing, praying for, or meditating for spells for the day, no matter what class you are, requires a quarter hour, that's 15 minutes, per spell, per level, to acquire spells for the day. Once you get into the higher level stuff, this becomes a nightmare. Let me explain. I'll give you an example. You have an 18th level magic user. An 18th level magic user. And he must sleep for at least 12 hours because he's got 9th level spells. At least one, I think. And then spend, according to the book, if he has no spells memorized, he has to spend 34 and 3/4 hours memorizing spells. If I've done my math correctly. Because he's got a lot of damn spells to memorize. This will allow him to memorize his full allotment of spells for the day. So he slept for 12 hours and then he's memorizing and reading and studying for 34, almost 35 hours. Let me make sure Yep, that's 34 and 3/4 hours. I just did the math again to double check myself. Be bad to put a video and put out bad info. Okay, 34 and 3/4 hours to memorize all of his spells. Now, even if he only has to memorize the spell slots he used from the previous day, the time spent could be enormous. 5 first level spells would require 1.25 hours. 5 second level spells would require 2.5 hours. 5 third level spells would require 3 3/4 hours, etc. 1 single 5th level spell would require 1.25 hours. You see what I'm saying? It's insane. 1 single 9th level spell would require 2 hours and 15 minutes. It's insane. I've memorized my stuff. I'll be ready to go adventuring tomorrow, maybe the next day. That kind of thing. All that added up makes people not want to run wizards, and I can understand that. So here's what I do. Every spellcaster, regardless of level, requires 8 hours of sleep. Period. So, if they're going to stand guard, they have to stand their guard first, their shift first, and then, sleep for the 8 hours so they can get up and do their thing, or wait until after they get up and memorize their spells and then stand guard, kind of thing. However you want to do it in your game, however your players want to do it, it's up to you. But 8 hours of sleep. Then they'd have to take 15 minutes to memorize their spells. I know that's kind of a chintzy way to do it, and it doesn't take into account the complexity of some of the larger spells. But if you go by the book, it's getting a good night's sleep and then memorizing spells is a two day ordeal. It's ridiculous. So, at some point you'll have to sleep again. That kind of thing. So that's how I do it. They have to get 8 hours of sleep, and it takes 15 minutes to memorize spells. Memorize or pray for spells or whatever. That's the way I do it. Another rule that really irritates me, and this isn't a rule per se, but you'll find a lot of these in, there was one in, I want to say it was Dragon Magazine. It was a critical hit and fumble chart. Good hits and bad misses, I think it was called. And it's a great article, and what it does is it gives crit and fumble charts. A fumble is when you roll a 1, really bad, I rolled a 1, I fumbled, oh no, what happens? And then you roll on the chart and find what happened. And it's fun. I enjoy those. Conversely, when you roll a natural 20, that's a critical strike or a crit, and you do really good, and you roll on the other chart. And it gave a good idea of how a critical and fumble chart should be. I do my own, and there's a reason. I design my own critical hit and fumble charts, And the reason being was on the good hits and bad misses, there's a section where you drop your weapon and it breaks. And there's a percentage chance of the weapon breaking based on if it's a magical weapon, it has certain pluses, and for every plus of the weapon, you get to subtract X amount from it, from the chance for it to break. And that's just asinine. I understand if you drop an arrow and it lands wrong, it's a wooden shaft, a thin wooden shaft. If it breaks, yeah, it's iffy. It's so light, it'll probably bounce rather than break. But you see my point. A wooden spear, you can throw that on the ground, it's not going to break. Even the shaft is made of wood, it's thick wood, you throw it on the ground. A javelin, maybe I could see breaking. Use a little common sense there. But if you've got somebody who forged a magic sword, the chances of you dropping it and breaking it are pretty pointless. I mean, it's minuscule. It's non-existent. If you drop a normal sword on the ground and it breaks, you want to go get your money back, because whoever forged it did a shitty job. That's all I'm saying. If you drop it off a cliff and it falls for a mile and then hits a rock and breaks or bends or whatever, then I can see. But just dropping it on the ground, no, that's stupid. It's not going to break. I do my own because stuff like that was in the chart, and it didn't make any sense. So if you drop a sword and it breaks, there's something wrong with the sword. You need to get your money back. Even if it's magical, especially if it's magical. That being said, there are some rules that I don't use in the game, and there are some rules that players usually don't want me to use, but I insist on. Had a player a while back who insisted that, actually it was a group of players, they wanted everything by the book. I think I did a video on this. They wanted everything by the book, and by the book includes spell components. Oh yeah, where to use those too? Okay, great. So I did. And when they couldn't get up the wall, and the magic user's looking around trying to find a live spider to eat for the spell Spider Climb, yeah, it got pretty funny. Knowledge and notes. And I'm not talking about taking notes, I'm talking about passing notes. Okay. In Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, and in most other tabletop role-playing games, they have what's called player knowledge versus character knowledge. They may have other terms for it now. I think I want to say they're using the term metagaming for using player knowledge, but I'm old school. I use player knowledge versus character knowledge. Player knowledge is information and skills which the player has, but his character does not. Player knowledge in our modern world would include automobiles, how to fix and work on cars, computers, television, pop culture, that kind of thing. Or a player knowing stuff in the game that their character is unaware of. If your character is stuck in a town and the other players are off doing something else, but you can hear what they're doing, if you use that knowledge when you're actually playing your character, that's wrong too. That's called player knowledge. You overhear a conversation between the dungeon master and another player that's supposed to be private. He put the dungeon master pulls the player in the other room to talk, and you happen to overhear what they're talking about. If you use that knowledge in the game, that's player knowledge. Okay? You can't use player knowledge. Now, character knowledge is information and skills which the character has, but the player might not. For example, clerics would know medieval religion, basic first aid, mythology, clerical spells, etc. Fighters would know weapons, armor, care of weapons and armor, basic tactics, basic strategy, basic first aid, etc. Thieves in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons would know basic biology, in other words, where to stick the knife. Locksmith, basic mechanics for figuring out locks and traps, basic politics, basic geography, where to steal and who to steal from, that kind of thing. Magic users would know basic physics, because you have to know the laws of physics in order to break them. They would know basic physics, alchemy, history, herbalism, that kind of thing. You see the difference? These two types of knowledges can cross, but it's rare. Usually, if you're using character knowledge, that's a good thing. You may not know everything your character does, but you can fudge it. My character would know how to do this, so my character's going to do it. The dungeon master should, if the dungeon master requires you to know how to shoe a horse, yeah, that dungeon master doesn't understand the game concept of character knowledge. However, if the game that you're playing involves some time travel and your character jumps in and drives away in the car and you're playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, yeah, there's something wrong with that. As a dungeon master, it's important for you to keep the player knowledge and character knowledge separate when necessary. I have made mistakes, and it is definitely detrimental to the game. At one point, I accidentally let slip that one of the player characters was a ninja. Most players want to keep that shit secret, and rightly so. It killed an entire plot line, and I don't think the player ever forgave me. It was a complete accident. I was in the course of the conversation, I let it slip, and it was just stupid on my part. And it killed an entire plot line for the campaign. I had 2 copies of a note at one point. One with the total information, and one with red ink, which I was using for bloodstains, which hid key parts of the information. I was using it as a visual aid, something I could give to players. I accidentally left the total note, the unbloodied version of the note, out on the table, and all of the players read it without thinking about it because they thought it was something that they should know. Bye-bye campaign. The whole thing went away. I had to start over. I ran him in something little there, but then 3 months worth of work was shot, and I had to go and start researching all over again and getting an entirely new campaign set up because they knew what was going on. It ruined the entire campaign. Don't be afraid to take a player into the other room and speak secretly. Don't be afraid of whispering. Get right in his ear if you have to. Don't be afraid to pass notes when necessary, and encourage your players to do the same. I was playing in one game, and the dungeon master was big on notes. So anytime anything happened, a barrage of notes would fly into him, and he had to sit there and sort through them all. That you throw your note, then basically go take a pee break and go grab something to drink or whatever, because he's going to be a while reading all the notes. And that's part of the game. But it keeps certain player knowledge. It keeps certain player knowledge out of the game, and that's a good thing. Don't let your players weasel info out of you. This is one of the most important things, because they will. They're certainly going to try, and many of them are some devious sons of bitches. They're going to try it. I had a guy, his name was David. This guy asked question after question after question after question. This guy showed up at my work to ask me questions about the D&D game. I was in the back doing prep work, and I worked at a restaurant, and one of the girls up front came back and said, "Hey, there's a guy here that needs to talk to you." Okay, so I went up front. He was there, and I said, dude, what's going on? And he goes, "Okay, if my character," I'm like, "Dude, I'm at work, go away." They will try to weasel information out of you any way they can. Don't let them. Players who know more than they should will destroy your game. I'm just saying. And Lord knows they're going to try. I'm just saying. So, try to keep player knowledge and character knowledge as separate as you can. Sometimes, like I said, sometimes they cross when a player knows. Like, for example, if a player knows how to shoe a horse, that's player knowledge and character knowledge. If you're playing in a modern day role-playing game, and chances are most every player, every character knows how to drive a car, but they may not know how to drive a tank. You see what I'm saying? There's player knowledge and character knowledge where they don't cross. You have to keep them separate. So just word to the wise. Dungeon master etiquette, and this is pretty much advice for dungeon masters. I do a lot of videos suggesting how dungeon masters can improve their games and how players can improve their play. I've also made suggestions on how players should act during the games and what not to do during their games. Mostly it's just, don't be an asshole kind of thing. And I always say, if you don't choose to follow my advice, cool. You don't have to. These aren't hard, fast rules. These are suggestions and advice. If you decide to use and abuse my rules, knock yourself out. If you decide to ignore them completely, knock yourself out. It's just advice. They're not rules. Okay? This particular video is specifically for dungeon masters. After all, dungeon masters are people too. Technically, we are players. We are playing the game. We're running it, but we're playing it. And there's a certain decorum that dungeon masters are expected to maintain. These are do's and don'ts for dungeon masters as well. All right, regarding your players. The players in your game are people, and as such, they are entitled to respect. Players will come up with the damnedest and sometimes the most inane and illogical bullshit plans conceivable by the mind of man. The trick is to understand the three possibilities. First, the player does not understand the situation. If that's the case, this is your fault, and for not explaining it well enough. And you have to explain every facet of the situation. You have to explain it well enough so that they have a grasp of what's going on. This is mental theater. A good friend of mine used that the other day, and I'm going to start using it. Mental theater is what it is. They have to be able to mentally grasp what the situation. If you have not explained it well enough, they will not understand it. This will cause problems. Sometimes their bad plans are because they don't understand something because you haven't explained it well enough. That's suggestion one. That's possibility one, excuse me. Possibility two, their grasp of logic and or physics is faulty. This is fairly common. They simply believe that their character is capable of doing things that it cannot do. Or they believe the outcome will justify the actions, whatever that is. It is your job to mediate the situation. Remember, this player is being on the level and honestly believes this course of action is not only appropriate, but will be advantageous somehow. This is I like to call this an honest mistake. And this happens. This actually happens a lot in the game. This is more than likely the most common situation. If you've explained the situation well enough and they understand what's going on, sometimes people just make bad plans. They have bad ideas. It happens. How many businesses have gone broke with bad business plans? It happens. Okay? You got to mediate it and play it out. If the bad guy, you can't undermine the bad guy's intelligence or his plan to make the player succeed. However, I mean, if the player makes a stupid ass plan, knowing the situation, they make a stupid ass plan and they still succeed, they're going to continue with these stupid ass plans. If their stupid ass plan fails, oh crap, we need a better plan. See how that works? It's a way of teaching them to be better players. And everybody wants to be better players. Okay? So, remember, it's your job to mediate the situation. Sometimes bad plans fail. And you can mediate it to the point to where the failure is a minor failure as opposed to a cataclysmic failure. But remember, that if these players are not... They're not being assholes. They understand the situation. They just had a bad idea. Sometimes bad ideas fail badly. Look up a video that I did called something like How to Sink the Ocean, I think it's called. My players, how to sink how to move, they move the ocean, basically. How not to move the ocean, I think it's called. They moved their ocean on top of their continent and destroyed the entire gaming world that I had, and we had to start over. A bad plan, okay? Sometimes that happens. There's nothing you can do about it. Once the rules were established and they used those rules effectively, they knew the rules. One of the players acted stupidly, and honestly, it was bad luck. The guy with the amulet didn't make it through the portal in time, and he got killed while the portal was still open. So there was no way to close the portal, and the ocean poured through said portal because it was underwater. The ocean poured through said portal and submerged the continent. It was, how not to move the ocean, basically. I think it's called. But go find it and look it up. You'll see what I'm talking about. A bad plan. Now, and that's not really. It wasn't really a plan. It was more bad luck than anything because this guy didn't plan to do that. He opened the portal trying to get out, and then he got killed before he could close the portal. So, again, just a bad situation. There's nothing you can do about it. Then we have the third situation. The player is either trying to milk the situation or is trying to bullshit his or her way through it. Sometimes they try to intimidate the dungeon master. Sometimes they try to weasel their way past the rules. This player can and will undermine your game because he or she has no faith in you as a dungeon master. The player doesn't respect you and is trying to weasel through the situation. Later on, this player will talk shit about you and will try to sway your players to his way of thinking. This player deserves to have his player character killed and or penalized in the course of the game. But it is important to make sure every player sees that you're not being spiteful or retaliatory towards that player. Stupid actions carry consequences, and if you have set up your world properly, nature will simply take its course. No otherworldly 1,000 hit die lightning bolts. None of that stuff. I used to play with a guy, and his thing was anytime somebody tried to question him on a rule or try to figure a better way to do something other than his story, which he thought trumped the rules, a mystery 1,000 hit die lightning bolt would come out of nowhere and obliterate the player character, and you'd have to make up a new character. Yeah, I played in his game exactly 1 week. I saw it happen to 2 other players, and I just didn't go anymore because this guy's name was Bill, and he was a piece of shit, and he didn't know how to dungeon master. But that's what that boils down to. If you set up your game properly, you won't need to do that. The world will take care of the situation. If the guy decides to attack an army of 5,000 people, you give me 5,000 D20 rolls, I'm going to roll some crits. Okay? If the guy decides, well, I think we can take that dragon. Yeah, he won't, we can take that dragon. Yeah. You better be high enough level and be packing some serious firepower, because dragons are not wimps in any event. The crappiest dragon is still a badass. When a player tries to do stuff like that, it shows that they have no faith in you as a dungeon master. They believe you won't kill them. They believe you're soft, you're a wimp, you're more concerned with their survival than your world. And that's not the case. You want them to survive, but you don't want to sacrifice the integrity of your world for them to survive. Okay? If a character dies, a character dies. It's that simple. You got to let nature take its course, and nature in your world is the world you've set up. Just play it accordingly. Now, regarding other dungeon masters, here we go. Dungeon masters enjoy talking and debating with other dungeon masters. That is the nature of the beast. I get some of my best ideas talking to other dungeon masters. I learn from playing under other dungeon masters in their games. Many great ideas are shared between dungeon masters. A solid, intellectual, respectful debate can be fun and enlightening. However, if another dungeon master does not share your opinion or they do things completely different, that is their prerogative. Do not try to change his or her mind. Do not try to force your beliefs or your methods on them. Remember, the primary rule of dungeon mastering is if the players are having fun, they're doing it right. Okay? If his or her players enjoy his game, he or she is doing it correctly. They're doing it right. You have no right to try and change the way that they play. It's their game. Let them run it. I have long suggested that a dungeon master should play in other people's games to refresh and recharge their imagination and to learn more about running games. Remember, even if it's what not to do. Remember, nobody knows everything and nobody is too old to learn. I'm 56 years old. I'm going to be 57 in August. I'm playing in a game right now. It's 5th edition. I don't know the rules as well as my son does, as well you know. But the people that are running this game are top notch. They are excellent dungeon masters. Okay? I have loads more experience than they do, but I am learning so much from them. Not so much of the rules of 5th edition, but in how to run a game. I'm learning from them. Okay? You're never too good, too perfect to learn. Never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, try to influence or otherwise bully another dungeon master, especially if you're playing in their game. They deserve exactly as much respect as you do. And in their game, they are the dungeon master. Sit back, let them run the game, and enjoy yourself. You're there to play. Sit back and play. Case in point, and I just talked about this, we finally found a good gaming group in this area. They meet once a week. My son and I play. My wife works that day, otherwise she would play as well. They play 5th edition. I'm enjoying playing in their games. I don't usually play 5th edition, and this is an educational experience for me. Our 2 dungeon masters are Chris and Nico. I have been running Advanced Dungeons and Dragons probably longer than they've been alive. But they are the dungeon masters. I do not argue with them, nor do I try to show them a better way. It's their game, and I am a player there. Both Nico and Chris are excellent dungeon masters. They know the material. They run really great games. They're fair. They apply the rules equally to everyone, and they're consistent in that application. Everything I suggest in my games for how a dungeon master should act, they exemplify. Maybe someday they will get to play in my 1st edition game, and that would be great. But for now, I'm just really enjoying playing again. Kudos to the entire group. There's nothing like a great group of competent players being run by a competent and talented dungeon master. And I got to give these guys, these 2 people, their props. Nico and Chris are excellent, excellent dungeon masters. I'm learning a lot about 5th edition, and I'm learning a few things. Well, there's some things I'm learning, but there's also some things that I'm being reminded of as far as being a dungeon master goes. Because you play this long enough and some things kind of fall by the wayside, I'm learning some detail again, and it's awesome. Remember, the main thing about being a dungeon master is don't be an asshole, especially to another dungeon master, because someday you'll play in their game. and then the shoe will be on the other foot, you know what I'm saying? Ebb and flow. As a dungeon master, one of the most important things you need to do is to observe your players. The main goal of a dungeon master is to provide a fun game for your players. If your players are having fun, you have succeeded. If not, you have failed. One of the biggest parts of this observation is ebb and flow. You need to take note of the feel of the game. I've been playing this game for I started back in the 70s. I started running the game in 1979, 1980. I've been playing a long time. I've been running it a long time. And it boggles my mind when a dungeon master doesn't understand the feel of the game. What I mean by that is your players' reactions to things, their general mood. It takes time to figure out how to spot things like that, the signs of when players are having fun and when they're not, when they're bored and when they're not, when they're restless when they're not, that kind of thing. If the game is slowing down, you need to have options to liven it up. And as a game master, a dungeon master, your job is to provide this catalyst. And what I mean by that is you need to have stuff ready for if the game slows down. You need to have stuff ready for when there is downtime. You need to have stuff ready for when you need to perk things up a little bit. This does not mean throwing a monster at them or having bandits waiting in the wings, although sometimes that could be fun. For example, a non-player character with a problem for the player characters to help with could be fun. A kid runs up, help, I can't find my dog. Just anything, some kind of obstacle. For example, a river with no bridge that they have to cross, a forest fire, a flood, etc. That could work. A minor emergency like a lack of supplies, a water shortage, missing items stolen by bandits or raccoons, whatever. That could provide a diversion and give them something to liven up the game without actually being dangerous. An encounter with the king's men who ask questions about some random event which nobody in the group could, even knows about, could be fun, because later on you could tie that into your campaign. The options are only limited by your storyline thus far, because your imagination should be endless. It's the storyline, what you can fit into the moment. Good storytelling for your player characters consists of several elements, and I use two basic philosophies when I run a game. First off, I introduce multiple seemingly random elements of the story. I let my players weave these elements together into the tapestry of the story. Then I let my players resolve the story. The second one is, I introduce a problem. I let the player characters strive to find a way to solve the problem, collecting objects, discovering information, etc. And then I let the player characters solve the problem. The build-up is the key to a successful resolution. Build-up needs to be steady so that the players aren't getting restless. It can't be so slow that the players are bored. You see what I'm saying? There's balance there. In the first philosophy, the build-up is in the player characters weaving the elements into the tapestry. In the second philosophy, the build-up starts when the problem is discovered. The first philosophy is kind of like a pyramid. The pieces are all scattered around for the player characters to gather together and climb to the top, which is the resolution. Philosophy 2 is the tree method used in many adventure movies. You run the PCs up the tree, throw rocks at them until they find a way down. And it's different for every group, because your group, every group of players has its own dynamic. You're going to have a leader, you're going to have followers, you're going to have people with specific functions. They all have different dynamics. The first philosophy is a little more cerebral, kind of like a murder mystery, and presents a problem the players have to solve. Philosophy 2 is a little more action-oriented, kind of like a movie, and is a race to stop the villain. A good campaign, at least in my opinion, uses both of these methods in tandem to allow your player characters the best of both worlds. The issue you really have to watch for, as I said in the beginning of this video, is the ebb and flow of the adventure. If your players are stuck and really cannot figure out your clues, they will be frustrated. If your players are working to solve clue after riddle ad infinitum, they're going to get bored. Either one will not be fun for the player characters. The answer to this is more clues that help solve the clues they are having problems with, or a random encounter of the types I mentioned before to liven the game up a bit. Sometimes a diversion is just the thing. The main virtue in all of this as a dungeon master is patience. Let the story unfold in the player's time. If it takes them 3 game sessions to figure out that the minor villain is the captain of the guard, so be it. But the players have to figure it out. Giving them the obvious answers undermines the fun. Getting back to the ebb and flow aspect, if the players are stuck and really have no idea, maybe you need to let them find some more clues. Something that illuminates the situation a little better. Here's the one thing you really have to be careful of. Never, never, never tell them the answers out of frustration. This will do nothing but demean them, ruin the story, and build resentment. All players want to beat the dungeon master, and in this situation, that means they have to find the clues and information to defeat the villains you create. That way, when they physically defeat your villain, they will have that "oh yeah" moment that everybody likes. Never ever deny your players that moment. It's what they play the game for. You know what I'm saying? Part of ebb and flow is knowing when to back off. If your players figure ways to beat you, so be it. That's your job. I've played with dungeon masters who they get angry when the players win. That's the whole point of the game. The players have to succeed in a grand adventure. Your job, ultimately, is to lose. Think about that. Is play balance. Play balance is extremely important. Before you run a game, you want to talk to your players and find out what kind of game they're expecting. If they're expecting a hack and slash combat-oriented game where they just go kill things and take their shit, load up on gold and take it back and sell, buy better stuff so they can go kill more important, more powerful monsters and take their stuff and go sell it to go, blah, 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 rinse and repeat. That's called power play, hack and slash kind of things, glorified murder hobos. And that's fine. If that's what they want to play, that's fine. You can do that easy. That's not a problem. But if you have a bunch of players who want to role play, it takes a little bit more thought. You got to put some more effort into it because you have to come up with believable backstories for the non-player characters. You have to put a little more effort and thought into the background of the world. You have to create the world. Your average peasant may not be a cookie cutter cardboard cutout, as it were. He may have valuable information. He may be the long lost son of a disgraced noble. He may be an exiled knight who is taken to farming. You don't know. You have to work all that into the game. Do you see what I'm saying? You have to make a world that will interest your players who are bent on role playing. And both are fun. I'm not saying there's nothing bad about either one of them, but you have to figure out what your players want. Now, either one of those is great. The problem of play balance comes into it when you have 4 players and 2 of them want to role play and 2 of them want to hack and slash. I've seen it work, but it's rare. You have to balance power play versus role play. You have to balance violence versus reason, good guys versus bad guys, player character balance. All the players have to be essentially the same power level. But if you have some players who have designed their characters to be reasoning, thinking, problem solvers, and other players who have designed their characters to be killing machines, you're going to have problems with the monsters that you throw at them. Because anything that's going to give the hack and slash players an actual run for their money is going to murder the role players and step over their carcasses. Or maybe eat them. I don't know, depending on the monster. You have to balance all that out. your good guys have to be equal to the task of the bad guys. Now you can use your bad guys and maybe overpower the bad guys just a little bit, because there has to be a challenge. But as far as play balance goes, this actually happened to me. I had a group that I was running, and 4 of them wanted to role play, and 2 of them were mindless killing machines. And I don't use that term lightly. They were mindless killing machines. Ugh, kill was their thing. What is it? I don't know. Kill it. Step on its head. That kind of thing. So I, first off, I was running a game I was unfamiliar with. It was not Dungeons and Dragons. It was another game. One of my players brought it to me and begged me to run it, and I said, "Okay, great. We got a group. We'll figure a way to." And I'm reading up on the rules and stuff, and I'm not going to go into the game. But my point is, we had 4 players that wanted to play role play in this fantastic world that the game provided, and it was a great game. But we had 2 other characters who just literally were mindless killing machines, and anything I put up against the group that these 4 could reason with, the 2 players killed. Anything I could put up against the group that these 2 could, could have problems with and actually had a challenge defeating, these 4 guys ran and hid because they had no chance whatsoever. Play balance. Your players have to all be roughly the same level. Now, you're never going to get them exactly equal, but at least have them on the same footing. You know what I'm saying? Roughly equivalent. Player character balance is one of the most important aspects of the game. All of the players need to be able to function on 2 basic levels: combat and reason. If a player has a character that's just built for combat and he knows it, and he stands in the background and lets everybody else do the reasoning, and when combat happens, he jumps out there and takes care of it, that's fine. But when you have characters that they're reasoning characters, and they want to talk to everything, and the combat oriented characters want to go out and kill everything, it's kind of hard to talk to something while 2 of the players in the group are trying to kill it. There's got to be some party cohesion. Okay, party balance, play balance is very, very important. The reasoning characters are very important in the group. You have to have at least one person who can reason. You have to have at least one person who can do combat. But it's nice to have a mix of both. And it's nice if everybody can do a little bit of everything. The reasoning aspect of it helps to solve problems. If you have a character with a very low intelligence, he's not solving a hell of a lot of problems. If you have a character with a high intelligence, he can solve problems, but if he's got a low strength and a low dex and like that, his combat ability is going to suffer. Play balance is important, and it's also sometimes difficult to achieve. If you have a player in your group who has a character that they really, really want to run, but it just doesn't fit, sometimes you have to say, this is a great character, I agree, and I'm going to make a separate game so that you can play it in there, and we'll have everybody else make up new characters. You can run a separate game for that. That's fine. But if it doesn't fit the campaign that you're running, it doesn't fit. Sometimes you have to put your foot down. And I am loath to turn anyone away from a game, but sometimes you have to have them make up a different character. It's that simple. Sometimes when you have a group of players that work well together, it's better to change your campaign to better fit those players. Remember, the whole point of the game is for everybody to have fun, and that includes the game master. If you get excited about just killing player characters, there's a term for that. You're called a killer dungeon master. Yeah, you just try to kill off characters. You create virtually impossible scenarios. I know of one person who was in a killer dungeon run by a killer dungeon master who actually survived that campaign, and it wasn't me. I died. my friend Gerald. Gerald is the consummate. He reasons things out, but he's also good at hack and slash. He's a good tactician. He knows how to get the most out of a character, even if he has bad die rolls. If he rolls a crappy character, he can still make that character work because he has tactics. I found that the only problem he has is if he has bad die rolls on stats. For example, say his intelligence is a 9 on a character from 3 to 18, and his character rolls a 9. If you roll a 9 for his character's intelligence, make him roll the intelligence. That's pretty much the only way to beat him because he's got a good head for tactics and strategy, and he knows how to find loopholes in spells descriptions and things like that. He can work around almost any impediment. So he's the only person I know of who actually survived a killer dungeon. And I try not to run killer dungeons because to me it's not fun. The whole point of a dungeon master is to make your players an adventure that they can have fun in. Who likes making up characters over and over and over? It's just, I like making up a character. But once I make it, I want to play it. And once I play it, I want to continue playing it. I want to build that character up. If he dies, that's cool. I can make another one. But if all you're doing is making up characters so they can die, it takes the it's stupid. It gets stupid after a while. And I have left games for that. I was playing in a guy's game years ago, and the third time I sat down to play, the third week in a row, I had a brand new character. And within 10 minutes, that character died because of impossible odds that I could not find a way out of. And it wasn't, well, you're in a dungeon and there's a monster you have to defeat. I can sit back and try to think of a way to defeat the monster. That's not a problem. What happened was we were in a town. My character was asleep in his room in the hotel, and he died in his sleep because somebody came in with a mace and bashed his skull in, and he didn't wake up. I didn't get a roll to hear. My character had a skill called alertness, and I was asleep, and apparently sleeping so deep, my alertness did not kick in, and a thug came in and bashed my skull in and stole all my shit. I hadn't even a chance to do anything with the character. At that point, it's time to go. Play balance is very important, not only for the players, but for the game master. You have to have scenarios, and if you're going to take them into a combat situation, for example, they have to have a chance to win. It's not, you can't just throw them against overwhelming odds constantly. Now, if it's seemingly overwhelming odds, but there is a way to beat it, then that's fine. If they have a reasonable chance to find that way. If there's 5 players and they have an army of 20,000 guys out there, I don't care how badass they are. You give me 20,000 rolls, somebody's going to roll a crit. A crit is a crit no matter who rolls it. That kind of thing. They're all going to die. If they try to fight 5,000 guys head up and there's 5 of them, 1,000 to 1 odds, yeah, they're going to die. I try not to run black dragons all the time because those can, especially in underground settings, check out my video on that. There's a lot to be said for play balance. We'll leave it at that. My point is, the objective of the game master is to create a game that's fun for the players. If they're having fun, you've done your job. If they're not having fun, then you need to, either they're not into the game the way you are, they're expecting a different kind of a game, or maybe your game is just not right for them. There's a lot of subtleties that go into that, and it takes time to figure those out. But play balance. That's all there is. If you have one player who is a level 3 and 8 players who are level 9, the level 3 is going to do a lot of hiding and running. That's all I gotta say. So, play balance. But again, if you're a budding dungeon master and you want to start running games, That's absolutely wonderful. You have help. Don't think you're just thrown to the wolves. The books can seem overwhelming, but they're not. Once you learn to play, it's actually pretty simple. Coming up with the scenarios can be a task, but once you do and you've got it worked out and balanced out and everything, it's so much fun. Monty Hall, Haul. And yes, that's misspelled for a reason. When you run a Dungeons and Dragons game, as the Dungeon Master, you set the rewards or the treasure or whatever it is. And you have to be careful doing that. You have to balance it out. You need to make sure that the reward matches the risk of whatever the scenario or an encounter was. If you kill an orc, he may have a few gold pieces on him at tops. Most orcs don't have magic items. Most orcs, because they're little minor peon bad guys. Now, a dragon, you slay a dragon, he's been collecting treasure for God knows how many centuries. He sleeps on a pile of gold. The movie The Hobbit, where he went under there and Smaug was asleep on that pile of gold. Yeah, that's pretty much what it should boil down to. There's tons of gold down there. Of course, in that particular scenario, that may have been over the top a little because the dwarves had been gathering this treasure for generations. Dwarves live a long time, hundreds of years, several hundred years at a time. So they had been gathering this huge treasure hoard for generations, and then the dragon came in and just took it over. So that may be a bit over the top even for a dragon, but my point is, dragons collect treasure, and they can have magic items, they can have potions and scrolls and magical artifacts and big piles of coinage and the whole 9 yards. But when you're running, usually a single player cannot kill a dragon. Usually. There's exceptions to every rule, but usually. Excuse me. The point is, you need to make sure that the reward or the treasure, whatever, matches the risk of whatever the scenario is. You also have to make sure that you don't give the player characters so much treasure that it's no longer fun to adventure. It's pointless to adventure. If a character has so much money they can purchase a kingdom, why go spelunking in caves? You can live the high life. You see what I'm saying? There's some logic. Of course, there are some players who are just greedy and never get enough. I've got 10 billion gold pieces in a cave and blah, 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 but I'm going to go out and slay some orcs, One crit and they're dead, and then that pile of gold is useless, you know what I'm saying? It's got to match. It's got to, and there's ways in your game, if you're running a game, there's ways to relieve players of their hard-earned cash, gold. One, a player character can only carry so much. I did a video on encumbrance. Most player characters can carry 100 coins, 200 coins, whatever. Maybe some gems and jewelry because that's worth a lot of money, and that's found a lot in treasures as well. But most of the time they don't carry a whole hell of a lot because the local economy in your game also has to be taken into consideration. Let me explain. If the locals are very poor, it's a poor kingdom, and they're dealing basically in silver pieces, and nobody's ever seen a gold piece, a golden coin. Nobody's ever seen one. It's all silver or copper or whatever. A player character who comes into town with 1 million gold pieces, he's a king. He can literally purchase the kingdom. It doesn't, what's the point? Years ago, a good dungeon master, he was a good guy, but he overplayed the mithril hand. And mithril in Dungeons and Dragons, and in The Hobbit and in Lord of the Rings, they called it mithril. And mithril, however you want to pronounce it. It is a metal naturally occurring, and it's naturally magical. It naturally gives you a +4. So if you make armor out of it, it's +4 armor. If you have a sword, it's a +4 sword. Just, you don't have to have a wizard for that. Just, have a dwarf forge it, or somebody who knows how, make a sword out of it, and it's automatically a +4 weapon. It's really, really valuable stuff. Well, this guy, this dungeon master, we had a group of about, I want to say we had 6 players, if I recall correctly. It's been years ago. And we found a vein of mithril, and we mined it. We stopped adventuring and just mined the mithril. We came out with a wagon load of mithril each, and so we brought that to town, and we found a guy who could forge it, who could forge the mithril into different things, a smith, and we were making all kinds of stuff and selling it for major money. Problem was, it upset the local economy because everybody had a mithril something. I got a mithril shield. What do you got? I got a mithril sword. It became no longer special. It's like having too many magic items in your game. Magic is supposed to be special. If everybody has +14 everything, what's the point? You see what I'm saying? Finding a magic item should be the culmination of a quest. We're looking for this magic sword. Well, there you go. You load up on all your normal stuff and go find the magic sword, and maybe there's some other stuff with it, and other players can benefit as well. But my point is, magic should be rare. If it's not rare, it's not special. You see? So, too much magic items also can upset the game balance. There's a lot of different ways you can upset it, and setting the treasure to match the risk is it's something to consider. It can be a dicey proposition. A dungeon master who puts the players up against a few orcs guarding a cave loaded with gold pieces, gems, jewelry, magic items, more stuff than they could possibly carry out. Game masters who do that have garnered a nickname over the years of Monty Hall, Haul, because everybody's got a haul. Such an overly generous treasure tends to end games, because when a player character has so much that they no longer need to adventure, what's the main point of adventuring is becoming rich and famous. Well, if you're rich, if you have that much money, you don't need to adventure anymore. And everybody's going to know your name because you're spending money left and right. You see what I'm saying? So a Monty Hall dungeon master is not necessarily a good thing. It's great if you're the guy who gets to benefit from the gold, but then you have to make up a new character because the game ends. Or hell, I don't know, you may be a greedy SOB and just want to continue adventuring, but that's, whatever. My point is, if you give so much gold and treasure and magic items and blah, 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 for doing virtually nothing. I was playing a game one time, we killed a snake. It was a normal snake, it had 2 hit points. It was 6 of us. We killed a snake because we were camping right here near the mouth of this cave. We were going to go explore the cave the next day. The only thing guarding the cave was a snake. One snake. It wasn't even poisonous. We killed it with a stick. Okay? We walked into the cave, around a corner in the back, because we had arrived late at night and we didn't have time to explore. So we went into the cave, around the corner, and there was a pile of gold, I want to say there was too much treasure for us to carry out. That's a Monty Hall. Okay, that dungeon master is a Monty Hall.